The Indiana Fever entered the 2025 season as the most commercially successful franchise in WNBA history. Sellout crowds at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, television ratings that surpassed those of several NBA markets. A Rookie of the Year in Caitlin Clark, who had, in the span of a single season, rewritten the financial projections of the entire league. By any external measure, the organization had arrived at a rare and enviable position. The foundation was in place. The audience was there. The momentum was real. Then the front office hired Stephanie White. The decision was framed at the time as a return to basketball credibility. White had a serious coaching pedigree, a connection to Indiana basketball culture, and a reputation as a disciplinarian with strong defensive instincts. The organization signaled that it wanted to build something sustainable, not just commercially successful. That framing, reasonable on its face, contained within it the seeds of a philosophical conflict that has since grown into one of the most closely watched and most criticized coaching situations in recent WNBA memory. What has unfolded since her arrival is not, by most accounts, the product of a single bad decision or a rough stretch of games. It is, according to people inside the building, a systematic restructuring of the team's identity, one that has left the fan base deeply divided, the roster visibly unsettled, and the broader basketball conversation about the Fever increasingly focused not on wins and losses, but on whether the organization made a fundamental error in judgment. To understand the criticism of Stephanie White, you have to understand what the Fever were before she arrived. The team that emerged in 2024 was not built on defensive solidity or positional discipline. It was built on pace, on Caitlin Clark's ability to create offense from nothing, on the kind of fast-break basketball that punishes teams before they can set up a defense. That style was not an accident. It was a deliberate construction, and it worked. Fans responded to it. Opponents struggled to contain it. The league took notice. White's system operates differently. Her coaching philosophy centers on half-court execution, disciplined rotations, and defensive accountability. Those are not inherently bad values. Plenty of championship teams have been built on them. The problem, as critics have consistently pointed out, is the mismatch between that philosophy and the specific personnel the Fever have assembled around Clark. Clark is not a half-court player by design. Her most dangerous attributes, the pull-up three from the logo, the ability to push pace off a defensive rebound, the willingness to take and make shots that disrupt defensive planning, are assets that tend to be diminished, not amplified, when the game slows down and runs through a set offense. The concern being raised by fans, analysts, and reportedly by people within the organization itself is that White's system structurally underutilizes the player who has made the Fever what they are. That concern has not stayed theoretical. Viewers watching games this season have noted, repeatedly, that the offense lacks the spontaneity that defined the team a year earlier. The ball moves, but it moves according to a script, rather than in response to what Clark and her teammates are reading in real time. The results have been uneven, and the frustration among the fan base has been palpable. Beyond the tactical debate, there is the question of roster construction. White has made personnel decisions that have drawn sharp criticism, both from fans and from observers who cover the league closely. Veterans who were considered part of the team's cultural foundation have been moved out. Players whose profiles fit a more defensive, structure-oriented system have been brought in. The direction of the roster is clear. Whether that direction is wise is where the disagreement lies. Specifically, critics have pointed to a lack of forward depth and size. The Fever, as currently constructed, are undersized in ways that create exploitable mismatches against physical opponents. In a league where post presence and interior defense remain meaningful factors, that deficiency matters, and it was not inevitable. Choices were made. Those choices are now being evaluated against the team's performance, and the evaluation for a significant portion of the fan base is not favorable. There is also the matter of how the departures happened. In a locker room built over 2 seasons on a particular culture of open, energetic, fast-paced basketball, the removal of players who embodied that culture sent a message. Whether that message was intentional or not, it was received. Players who remain are, by several accounts, operating in an environment that feels more guarded and less cohesive than what preceded it. That shift in atmosphere has been one of the more consistent themes in coverage of the team this season. It shows up in small things: the bench reactions during games, the tone of post-game interviews, the absence of the kind of visible camaraderie that made the 2024 Fever genuinely compelling to watch. Teams take on the character of their coaching staff over time. What the Fever are reflecting in 2025 is an organization managing internal tension. The Caitlin Clark question sits at the center of all of it. Clark is the reason the Fever are a national story. She is the reason tickets sell, ratings climb, and sponsors call. She is also, by design and by talent, a player who needs a certain kind of system to operate at peak effectiveness. The debate about whether she is getting that system under Stephanie White has moved from fan speculation into something more substantive. Sources with access to the team's internal workings have described friction between the coaching staff's vision for how Clark should be deployed and Clark's own understanding of her game. The specifics of that friction are difficult to verify independently, but the general shape of the concern is supported by what is visible on film. Clark, in certain offensive sequences this season, has appeared to be playing within constraints that limit rather than leverage what makes her dangerous. That observation carries real weight because the question is not merely about winning games in the short term. It is about whether an organization is developing its franchise player in a direction that maximizes her long-term value to the team, to the league, and to the sport. If there is a genuine philosophical disconnect between Clark and her coaching staff, it is not a small administrative problem. It is a question about the organization's strategic direction. The fans who have raised this concern most loudly are not being irrational. They are watching games. They are comparing what they see now to what they saw in 2024. They are asking whether the coaching decisions being made are in the best interests of a player who has, by any objective measure, done more for the WNBA in 2 years than almost any player in the league's history. Those are legitimate questions. The fact that they are being asked in loud and sometimes hyperbolic terms on social media does not make the underlying concern less valid. The film session that has been described by multiple players as a turning point is worth examining in this context. According to accounts from inside the organization, White conducted a session that was experienced by a significant portion of the roster not as constructive criticism, but as a systematic undermining of confidence. Players who had built their games around the pace and space principles of the previous era found themselves on the receiving end of analysis that treated those principles as deficiencies rather than strengths. The result, by these accounts, was a room divided. Those players whose profiles aligned with White's system felt affirmed. Those whose profiles did not felt targeted. That kind of division, once it forms in a locker room, tends not to resolve itself quietly. It surfaces in practice intensity, in communication breakdowns, in the small moments of competitive play where trust and chemistry matter most. Locker room dynamics are, by nature, difficult to assess from outside. Coaches and players often experience the same events very differently, and what reads as harsh treatment from one perspective may be experienced as necessary accountability from another. What can be said with more confidence is that the narrative emerging from the Fever's building this season is not one of a team galvanized by challenge. It is one of a team navigating internal stress. The front office position in all of this is, publicly, one of support for White and her process. That is a standard institutional posture, and it would be unreasonable to expect otherwise. Organizations do not publicly undermine their own coaching hires mid-season. The signals of genuine concern, when they come, tend to arrive through other channels. Personnel decisions, contract structures, the shifting of informal authority within the building. Those signals are, by several accounts, present. The question is whether they will translate into action, and if so, when. What is clear is that the commercial stakes are real. The Fever built their current position on a fan base that was activated by Caitlin Clark and by a style of play that made the team exciting to watch. That fan base is now, in measurable ways, expressing dissatisfaction. Reports of declining advanced ticket sales, while not catastrophic in scale, represent a departure from the sellout trajectory the organization had established. The boycott rhetoric visible on social media is unlikely to produce the outcomes its proponents intend, but it is a signal, one that a commercially sophisticated organization should take seriously. The WNBA is at an inflection point. The league has more mainstream visibility, more broadcast revenue, and more cultural relevance than at any previous point in its history. The Fever are, in many respects, the face of that moment. How they manage this internal conflict will have implications not only for their own franchise, but for the narrative being built around women's professional basketball more broadly. The structural argument for Stephanie White's approach is not without merit, and it would be a disservice to the complexity of the situation to dismiss it entirely. Building a team that can win in the playoffs, where the game tends to slow down and defensive execution becomes more determinative, requires exactly the kind of discipline White is trying to install. The pace and space offense that works against inferior competition in the regular season can be neutralized by a well-prepared playoff opponent with size and length. If White's project is about building something that can compete in June rather than dominate in March, the logic is not irrational. The counter to that argument is that the means of implementation have been poorly calibrated for the specific roster in place. You cannot install a defensive, half-court system in a single offseason with the same personnel that ran a different system for 2 years and expect the transition to be seamless. The players who are being asked to change are not underperforming. They are being asked to perform differently, and in some cases, to accept roles that diminish what they do best. A more measured transition, one that preserved the team's offensive identity while gradually building defensive discipline around it, might have achieved White's objectives without the level of disruption that has followed. Whether that path was ever seriously considered, or whether White's philosophy required a more complete break from the previous era, is a question only those inside the organization can answer. What is observable from outside is that the break has been sharp, the disruption has been real, and the results on the court and in the stands have not yet justified the cost. There is a version of this story that ends with vindication. Championships have been won by coaches who faced similar levels of internal resistance and public skepticism. Organizations that absorb short-term criticism to build something more durable sometimes look prescient in retrospect. The 2025 season is not yet over, and final judgments are premature. But there is another version, equally well supported by what has happened so far, in which the Fever have made a structural error that will take years to correct. In that version, a coaching hire that prioritized a particular philosophy over a demonstrated formula for success has produced friction, roster instability, and a diminished product on the floor. In that version, the organization had something rare and squandered it. The fan sentiment that has driven the conversation around the Fever this season reflects, in rough and sometimes uncharitable terms, a genuine concern about the second version. Viewers who filled Gainbridge Fieldhouse last year, who watched in growing numbers on TV, who bought jerseys and followed the team through a season that felt historic, those viewers are asking whether the people running the organization understand what they had and what they may be losing. That question does not have a clean answer yet. What can be said is that it is the right question to be asking, and that the people with the authority and the information to answer it are the ones who should be doing the most hard thinking right now. The Indiana Fever's position in the WNBA landscape is not guaranteed. It was built on a specific combination of personnel, style, and timing that created something genuinely exceptional. Whether the current leadership retains what made that combination work, or whether 2025 marks the beginning of a more difficult period, will depend on decisions being made now, in practice facilities, in front office conference rooms, and in the conversations between coaches and players that never become public. The results eventually will be.